Hi, this is Dr. Yeliz Essarian again. Let's discuss the findings of my research paper called IT-enabled knowledge creation for open innovation. Well, my first research question was, how do innovative open source software development teams create knowledge? The first one was the identification of the knowledge creation modes and behaviors and how often they were observed, of course. Um, I was able to code for all four types of knowledge creation modes. And what was very interesting is that um, the externalization was the one that was most often observed in the archival data. Now, if you look at the literature, you would expect to see socialization um, as the highest frequency. The reason for that is the literature. Well, let's go back to what socialization means. Socialization was actually the transfer of knowledge through the actual software code. And if you look at the literature, they emphasize over and over how much learning happens through sharing the code. However, we found out that open source software developers are a talkative bunch. They do make their knowledge extremely externalized by describing their thought processes and solution processes and justifications for why they chose something or over another option. The second one, second part of the research question one was the contribution by internal members, meaning the developers, versus the external knowledge creation by the users. Now, what's very interesting here is that we see about the same amount of knowledge creation by the internal members and the external members. And if you look at how they're distributed among the four different types of knowledge creation modes on the right, they're very similar as well. So that's quite interesting. You know, you have a team of people working on it, and then you have external people who are contributing from time to time. And how can they contribute the same amount of information? Well, the answer is lying in the number of contributors. The internal developers were 7 people and the users were 132 people. So when we looked at the averages, users contributed on the average 1 to 2 times to knowledge creation. However, due to the sheer number of contributors, their contribution was really surprisingly large. Um, how so? And here in this slide, we look at the 4 types of knowledge contribution by users versus developers. And developers are in black. And you see that they're roughly split 50-50 between the two. But then, luckily, our sampling enabled us to see a very different dynamic. This is the knowledge creation behaviors during critical events. And we see that the developers could contribute so much more to knowledge creation when there were really critical events, such as a, a problem that blocked a software release, a major problem in this system that brought about a stop in the process. So the developers are very knowledgeable, and apparently the users, some of them could help with critical events as well, but not to the same extent. Now, this is very interesting and useful, these two tables, because if this helps us go back to the previous literature and respond to it. In the previous literature, it says getting users committed and there for you in the long run is very important. Increasing the number of users is very important to open source and open innovation. And in fact, they were right, because look at how much users contributed to knowledge creation. However, one thing we need to highlight is that having good users is not enough. We have to have dedicated long-term developer commitment, because when really serious things happen, users will not be able to resolve everything. So that's also good for good thing to learn for companies who want to invest in open source for creativity purposes or for cost-cutting purposes, because regardless of what the outsiders can bring, you always need to have your own internal developers committed to the software for such an initiative to be successful. The second research question was, what is the role of IT in knowledge creation? And I would like to take us back to the industry or to the literature. What do we think of when we think of tools that are used for knowledge creation, knowledge management? Although you're not answering, I don't hear your answers, I can actually hear them. It's typically some sort of database, some sort of web-based knowledge management system where you sit down and write documents, or whatever documents you have for a project, you upload them and share them with others. Actually, with the increasing use of social media, things like blogs and wikis and even Twitter type of systems have been used to make up the new knowledge management systems. Well, let's see how it was in these teams. Very interestingly, so the top one is the developers listserv that was most often used as a source of knowledge creation, and the second one was the online project management tool. What's very interesting is the wiki and the website that we actually just named as knowledge management tools are at the bottom. Well, the thing to learn from this is, at least for these teams, the boring stuff like the listservs, like and listservs are basically emails. They include so much knowledge in them that they should be seen as sources of knowledge creation, sources of knowledge management system. What do we learn from this? I guess we learn, well, first of all, let's look at knowledge management system in a different way and not just treat wikis and websites and software like SharePoint as knowledge management portals, but let's look at what the teams use day to day as sources of knowledge and also find ways of mining these, for example, through data analytics. The second table shows on the left you have the knowledge creation modes, and on the right you have the different information technologies. What this table shows that's interesting is that for each knowledge creation mode, you had at least 2 or 3 different information systems that was used. So that also shows if you want to capture a source of information, source of knowledge, we need to make sure that we're aware that there are multiple technologies that the teams use are sources of knowledge management. So I've mentioned some of the contributions to theory, but here I provided a full list of it. Well, first of all, I would like to mention that what I've done in this paper, and if you'll pull up the paper, is a whole description of, as I also discussed here, how the coding schema came up with. So my contribution is to adapt the knowledge creation framework by Nonaka and Takoichi to the open innovation setting. I would recommend the use of adaptation and the use of the coding schema to other archival data, because I made it easy for others to analyze data, archival data for knowledge management purposes. So, what are the contributions to open source research? Well, organizations want to emulate open innovation teams such as open source. But as Agarfalk and Fitzgerald mentioned, emulation requires understanding of participation by both developers and users. So here we've highlighted that even though users make smaller amount of contribution to knowledge management, they actually these contributions make a difference due to the sheer number of contributors. So my findings supported the recommendation of researchers to engage and harvest external knowledge of outside contributors, but it did something else. Past research did not differentiate among the type and quality of contributions. So I identified that the teams are still dependent on knowledge creation for mission critical events. So they're depending on knowledge creation by the internal members for mission critical events. Contribution to practice is as follows. So now we understand the role of users versus developers. But also what we understand is that document management tools, project or task management tools, and transactional systems can be sources of knowledge management when transparencies and opportunities to interact with other members are provided to all team members. So don't limit yourself to one knowledge management tool. This research is applicable to other similar contexts because it's case study, and I have to highlight this. And what are the other similar contexts? These are really highly knowledge-intensive settings, such as engineering teams, software development teams, or product development teams. And that concludes my presentation for today.